With GGG formally announcing they are now back in the office, speculation has inevitably begun around what they will be buffing, nerfing, and perhaps even reworking. With that in mind, I wanted to offer some of my own speculations from a range of players' perspective, having both the Deadeye and the Pathfinder in endgame. Let's keep the conversation constructive in the comments below and let me know if you agree, disagree, or perhaps have any further things to add. First nerf speculation has got to be Energy Shield. With the lack of life nodes in the skill tree, unlike PoE 1, Energy Shield is just far superior in terms of a choice when we're looking at maxing out life, getting more armor, and combining it with evasion compounds your survivability massively. And this just presents a huge discrepancy in these areas, which I feel does really need to be addressed. And this is coming from someone who uses Energy Shield a lot at the moment. It just feels like I am doing myself a disservice if I don't get Energy Shield, and I don't know how you folks feel about this. I know some Ranger players just swear by stacking masses of evasion and chucking on acrobatics and whatnot, but I just feel that at the moment, evasion rating on its own, it's great, but it still does leave that gap that if you get hit by something big, you are going to get splattered. Energy Shield alleviates that issue, particularly when you've started to stack it incredibly high using Grim Feast, and we will go on to Grim Feast in a moment because I do feel that whilst we're not going to go into all the skills today, I do feel like Grim Feast is something that really does need taking a look at as well. But the question here, folks, is how can they address this though? I think they've got a really tricky one on their hands here. The passive tree is just chock full of Energy Shield friendly nodes, and it's really very easy to pick up a great deal of ES just from the nodes on your passive tree. And also, if you lean into getting it as a stat on your jewels, this is crazy. You can get jewels with 20% increased Energy Shield. I think I've been fortunate enough to pick up one of those, and the rest that I've got are all 16, 17, 18%. This all compounds rapidly. And then if you chuck on at Zeri's Disdain, the helm that increases your Energy Shield even further, you can very quickly find yourself rolling around with 2 to 3k Energy Shield. And if we throw Grim Feast on top of that, this further compounds the issue because Grim Feast allows you to double your Energy Shield reservoir. So you can end up with something like 6 to 8k Energy Shield and 2k life and an absolute boatload of evasion rating, whether you take acrobatics or not. So you're not getting hit, and when you do, you've got this massive bank of Energy Shield that can be replenished from killing enemies. It just negates so much damage. And this really got brought to my attention when CPA, one of my close friends that I play the game with, pointed out how his experience was playing the Warrior at the beginning with armor. I was just like, wow, this is not what my experience has been of the game at all. And it does feel like at the moment, the meta really is around Energy Shield, Grim Feast. And sure, this should be an option, but it just feels a little bit overtuned at the moment. And I don't know what you think about this one, folks, but do let me know in the comments. The only thing I can really think of to alleviate this other than nerfing them is you need to look at armor, and we need to look at perhaps, does the skill tree maybe need a little bit of life putting in there as well? So people who do want to go for the armor damage mitigation route, they get more of a payoff, and they also have that bank of health as well, because at the moment it just feels like opting for Energy Shield alongside all the other stats is king. The next area of speculation I think they might be looking at is that Heralds are just completely cracked at the moment. They are so incredibly strong. There's just crazy interactions that you can create between them, and the way that they ramp the output of your build is something that you can't really ignore. I've got both a Pathfinder and a Deadeye in the endgame now, so I'm looking at things from this angle, so I might be seeing it from a bit of a blinkered perspective, but I do feel like I'm becoming increasingly focused on how I can make Herald of Ice, Ash, Thunder work as effectively as possible with one another and do as much work, but the payoff is just too high. I don't know, perhaps that's just because I'm a newer player and I haven't got all the experience in the world yet, but correct me if I'm wrong, they just feel like something you can't pass up on if you want to make your life as easy as possible. What do you think, folks? Are Heralds overperforming? Do they need a little bit of a tweak, or are you absolutely happy with where they're at? Next up, cast on trigger. Now, this is a really interesting one because it's already been toned down, but it's no secret that if you grab yourself a Thief's Torment ring, use cast on shock with ball lightning along with orbs of storms and lightning rod, and you spam down these lightning rods in boss fights, you can trivialize the vast majority majority of challenging encounters very easily. The way that Thief's Torment works is it basically gives you life on hit and mana on hit, and when you're rapidly proccing your lightning rods and the amount of damage and the amount of raw leech you're getting from this setup, it just absolutely blows everything out of the water. And on one hand, I think this is great because I use it personally and I really enjoy having this in my arsenal, but on the flip side, it just feels like it's perhaps performing a little bit too well. And I think I've also seen that Cast on Ignite with, I believe it's Winter's Eye and Flame Wall, can also have some crazy interactions. So I really wouldn't be surprised if these end up getting a pass very soon. It's interesting because they've already tuned these back, and Cast on Shock in particular just sort of still felt like it was still performing really well just because of the way it works on bosses. So it'd be very interesting to see if they even acknowledge this or if they do something in the immediacy for that. And this one will come as no surprise, folks. Magic Find. Coming from Diablo 2, I am a little biased here because I grew up with Magic Find being the backbone of my farming escapades, and I really enjoy this stat, to be honest. I like it being in the game, and I think it does have a place in any ARPG. But with that being said, Diablo 2 and the insane rarity of some items like Zod Runes and Tyrael's Might, these things barely ever drop. It never really feels like items are raining, for want of a better phrase, and it doesn't feel like PoE 2 does at the moment. And whilst I haven't ramped mine beyond 150, so I can't comment personally on how nuts it gets in the upper echelons, I have seen other players demonstrating it, and it looks outrageous when you get up to those 400% levels. And personally, I've noticed a huge payoff when I get to around that 100% mark, and this actually feels quite rewarding without taking too much away from the power fantasy of building your character up. So with this in mind, I feel like a good remedy for this would be that rather than forcing players to just stack Magic Find all the way, getting up to that crazy number and perhaps taking away and detracting away from the power fantasy that we all enjoy, they could maybe make the diminishing return a little bit steeper sooner in the value range, and perhaps just lift the bottom end up a little bit and make it a little bit more effective. So that would mean there'd be more of a squashed sweet spot, for want of a better phrase, and that would mean that we could aim to have, you know, 100 to 200 or whatever it might be, whatever that number is that they rest on, and that's it. That's your sweet spot. So there is an element of trying to find these items, and it would keep the value of these items, but perhaps wouldn't make it absolutely game-changing to just forgo everything and go maximum rarity. I don't know. Again, folks, what do you think? These are just my musings on this topic. What do you think, folks? Are there any areas that you think need a balance pass, whether it's a buff or a nerf? Do you think any items perhaps need nerfing? I've seen people mentioning Pulsarceld might be a little bit too pokey. I'm not too sure about that one personally. I quite like that ring and think that it's in a good spot, particularly for lower level characters and those that are trying to get that cold proc off as much as possible. Or perhaps maybe you want to see things like the loot being increased again, or maybe the item level of what drops we get in endgame being tweaked a little bit so we can actually craft a little bit more. It just feels like we're fishing for items constantly and just not getting any payoff for it. That's my personal feeling anyway. Whatever you think, sound off in the comments below, and I'll see you soon. Check out this next video. It's got you covered. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, come check out a stream on YouTube or Twitch, and I'll see you in the next one.